You've felt it before. That stutter, that impossible echo, the eerie certainty that this exact moment, this breath, this light, this stranger's face has happened to you before. You called it déjà vu, a glitch, a misfire of memory, a trick of the tired brain. You were wrong. What you felt in that fraction of a second was the truth bleeding through. Because among the physicists who take Einstein seriously, and the equations that have survived a century of contact with reality, there is a conclusion many find inescapable, a conclusion so disturbing that most refuse to say it out loud. The past has not passed. The future is already here, and you have already died. Since you were a child, you have been told a story about time. Time, they said, is a river. It flows. It carries you forward. The past is upstream, lost behind you. The future is downstream, rushing toward you. And the only place you can ever stand is here, now. This is the most beautiful lie you have ever been told. Because if the river is real, then everything you have ever loved is being torn away from you every second, forever. The conversation with your grandfather that you can never have again. The summer afternoon when you were 11 and felt invincible. The face of someone you used to wake up next to. All of it, gone, carried downstream, erased. And the cruelest part of that loss, the part that wakes you at 4 a.m., is the conviction that they are gone, that the moment is sealed off, carried downstream beyond the reach of any force in the universe. What if I told you that everything you just felt is built on a misunderstanding so fundamental, so catastrophic, that physicists have spent the last 100 years quietly trying to figure out how to break the news to the rest of us? Time does not flow. There is no river. There is no current. There is no now that is moving forward. The past is not behind you. The future in this picture is not somewhere up ahead waiting to arrive. Every second of your life, the second you were born, the second you read these words, the second you take your last breath, exists right now, simultaneously, etched into the fabric of the universe, like scenes burned onto a DVD. This is not science fiction, and it is not, despite how it might sound, idle philosophy. It is one of the most seriously debated models of time in modern physics. And before this video is over, I'm going to show you why every clock you've ever owned has been lying to you. Why everything your eyes are showing you right now is already in the past. Why your memory works in only one direction, and what that single fact reveals about the structure of reality. Why déjà vu is not a glitch, but a leak. And why, if this is true, your loved ones did not die. They are simply located somewhere you cannot currently see. To understand what happened to time, we need to talk about the year 1908. A mathematician named Hermann Minkowski stood in front of a room of physicists and said something that should have ended the world. Henceforth, space by itself and time by itself are doomed to fade away into mere shadows. Only a kind of union of the two will preserve an independent reality. Time, Minkowski said, is not a thing that happens to space. Time is a direction in space, a fourth dimension, as real as length, width, and height. And if time is a direction, then everything that ever happens, every birthday, every funeral, every quiet Tuesday afternoon, is a location, a coordinate, a point in space-time. Like a city on a map, except instead of latitude and longitude, the address contains the moment in time when something occurred. The first kiss between your parents has an address. So does the moment you stopped believing in something you used to believe in. So does the second your heart will beat for the last time. All of these addresses are real, right now, already filed in the geometry. You are not a person moving through time. You are a four-dimensional shape embedded in it. This is what you actually look like if you could see yourself from outside time. A long, glistening worm of moments. Your infant cries are still happening at one end. Your last breath is already happening at the other. And every kiss, every fight, every lonely walk home, every triumph, they are all there simultaneously, woven into a single object that physicists call your world line. Every person you have ever known, every person who has ever lived, every person who will live, we are all woven into the same frozen tapestry. Some world lines run alongside yours for years before peeling away. Some intersect for a single afternoon. Some loop back and brush against yours decades later, in a hospital, in a cafe, in a name you find written in an old letter. None of these encounters are happening. All of them have already happened, and, strangely, they are all still happening right now, simultaneously. All three statements are equally true and equally meaningless because the words happening, have happened, and will happen simply don't exist in the geometry. There is only the shape. And Einstein, the man whose equations made this picture inescapable, appeared to grasp exactly what it meant. When his oldest friend died, Einstein wrote a letter to the man's family, and in that letter, he said something that, if you take physics seriously, you cannot ever fully recover from.
For us believing physicists, the distinction between past, present, and future is only a stubbornly persistent illusion.
An illusion. Read that again, slowly, because that one word, written by Einstein himself to a grieving family, quietly dismantles almost everything you were ever taught about time. The flowing of time, the slipping away of moments, the grief of losing someone. According to Einstein himself, according to the equations that built GPS satellites and atomic clocks and the smartphone in your hand, all of it is a stubbornly persistent illusion. The block in this reading is real, and we are inside it. Here is the strangest thing about you. You have never in your entire life seen the present moment. Not once, not for a single second. Every face you have ever loved, every face you have ever seen, was already in the past by the time the image arrived behind your eyes. Light is fast, the fastest thing in the universe. But it is not infinitely fast. When your wife smiles at you across a kitchen table, say 1.5 meters away, the light bouncing off her face takes about 5 nanoseconds to reach your eyes. Then your retinas need another 100 milliseconds to process the signal. Then your visual cortex needs more time still to assemble the picture you are seeing. By the time you see her smile, she has already finished smiling. She has already moved on to the next moment. The face you are looking at is a ghost, a photograph delivered late, a version of her that no longer exists. And it gets so much worse. Look at the moon tonight. The moon you are looking at is 1 1/3 seconds old. The light leaving its surface needs that long to cross the gap between us. If the moon vanished right now, if some unimaginable force scooped it out of existence, you would not know for another 1 1/3 seconds. You would still be looking at it, smiling at it, even though it would already be gone. The sun is 8 minutes and 20 seconds old. If the sun were extinguished right this instant, you would not know for nearly 9 full minutes. Plants would continue to grow. Birds would continue to sing. Children would continue to play in the daylight from a star that had already died. Everyone alive would be living inside a photograph. This is not a thought experiment. This is what you are doing every second of every day. You are not seeing the world. You are seeing a delayed broadcast of a world that has already moved on. Everything you are seeing right now is in the past. Layered pasts, stacked pasts. The whole sky is a museum. That star, the one your grandfather pointed at when you were 7 and said, "Make a wish." That star is already 600 years old by the time the wish leaves your lips. It might not even exist anymore. You might be wishing on a corpse. And now we have to talk about the worst part. This is Andromeda, the nearest large galaxy to our own, 2.5 million light years away. That means the photons reaching your eye from Andromeda, even right now, even from the most powerful telescope you've ever heard of, left their stars 2.5 million years ago. The Andromeda you can photograph is a fossil. The Andromeda that exists right now at this exact instant is a place no living human will ever see in their lifetime. But that's not the cosmic horror. That's just the warm-up. Imagine for a second an alien on a planet in Andromeda, sitting still, looking up at its sky. According to Einstein's relativity, that alien has a now, a slice of the block universe that, from its perspective, counts as the present moment. That slice extends across all of space. It includes Earth. It includes you, sitting exactly where you are sitting, watching this exact video. For an alien sitting still, its now matches up with our now, give or take the 2.5 million year communication lag. But now imagine the alien stands up. The alien is not moving fast, walking pace, about 4 miles an hour, the same speed you walk to your kitchen for a glass of water. But here is what relativity, taken at its word, tells us. The moment the alien stood up and started walking toward Earth, its now stopped intersecting with our now. It started intersecting with our future. Right now, somewhere in Andromeda, an alien may be taking a step toward Earth, and in that step, the alien's present moment includes things that, from your reference frame, have not happened yet. The election that hasn't been called, the diagnosis you haven't received, the accident on the freeway tomorrow that will rearrange 3 families, a war that has not yet started, your own funeral. This is not a fringe hypothesis. This is the Andromeda paradox, a thought experiment formalized by the philosophers Roger Penrose and Hilary Putnam, and a direct mathematical consequence of taking Einstein's relativity at face value. For 2 observers in motion to disagree about which events count as now, and for relativity to remain self-consistent, which it must, because we have tested it billions of times in particle accelerators and atomic clocks and GPS satellites, many physicists who follow the argument carefully arrive at the same conclusion. the future in some real sense must already exist. Otherwise, the aliens now would be pointing at nothing. The block in this view is not a metaphor. It is not a mere philosophical preference. For many who take Einstein at his word, it is arguably the most robust arrangement of reality we have for keeping the equations of physics self-consistent across all observers. Your tomorrow may already exist. Somewhere in Andromeda, an alien may be walking through it. But there's a problem with this picture. And if you're paying attention, you've already noticed it. If every moment of your life is already there, etched into the block, frozen, immovable, complete, then why does it feel like something is happening? Why does now feel so special? Why does this second feel real, while the one that just passed feels dead, and the one that hasn't arrived feels somehow not yet? Physicists call this the problem of the moving present, or simply, the problem of now. In the equations of Einstein's relativity, in mathematics that has held up across more than a century of testing, there is no marker for now. There is no special slice. There is no privileged moment. The block in this picture just is. But your consciousness somehow is dragging itself across that block, illuminating one slice at a time and calling that slice the present. That is what you are. Not a body, not a brain, but a flashlight, crawling in one direction across a frozen landscape, illuminating one moment at a time, and mistaking the movement of the beam for the passage of time itself. The block does not move. The universe does not change. Only the flashlight crawls. And one day, the flashlight will reach the far end of your world line. We call that death. But the body is still there. The moments are still there. Every laugh, every tear, every breath, all of it is still there, perfectly preserved in the block. The light just isn't on it anymore. Of course, not every physicist agrees. On one side, Presentism, the belief that only now is real. The past is gone. The future doesn't exist yet. Only this fleeting instant, again and again, eternally renewed. It's a comforting view. It feels right. It is, intuitively, what almost all of us experience. There's just one stubborn problem. It is hard to reconcile with the alien in Andromeda. Because if Presentism were strictly true, if only now were real, then the aliens now and your now couldn't disagree. But the math of relativity asks them to disagree. The future is reachable from someone else's present, which strongly suggests the future is, in some real sense, real. Let me tell you what we've already discovered together. Time may not be a river. It may be a frozen block. You may not be a body. You may be a four-dimensional worm of moments. Everything you see is already in the past. Light is too slow to deliver now. Somewhere in Andromeda, An alien's single step changes which moments count as their present, and that step seems to point at our future. Now may not be objectively real, only the flashlight of consciousness crawling across what was already there. Memory in this picture is not a recording. It is a physical scar etched into your brain by entropy as it moves through you. The past may not be gone. The future may not be coming. Everything that ever happens may already have. So why do you only remember one direction? What if memory itself is just a scar, left by entropy as it moves through you? And what is déjà vu, really? And why does any of this matter? That's what the rest of this video is about. A quick but important note. If you've made it this far, and you enjoy content with this level of depth, please consider subscribing. Your support is my greatest motivation to keep producing videos that require this much time and care. But if everything I have told you is true, if the past, the present, and the future are all equally real, frozen together in the same crystalline block, then I owe you an answer to one obvious question. Why do you only remember the past? If the future is just as real, just as etched, why don't you remember it? Why don't you wake up tomorrow knowing what you did the day before and what you're about to do next year? Why does memory only point in one direction? For decades, this has been one of the deepest puzzles in physics, because the equations of relativity, the equations of quantum mechanics, the equations that describe almost everything we know about the universe at the fundamental level, they don't seem to care which direction time runs. At the level of fundamental physics, there is no obvious past or future. There is only an axis. Run the equations forward, and the universe does its thing. Run them backward, and it does exactly the same thing in reverse. And nothing in the math complains. So why do you feel a difference? Why does coffee cool but never spontaneously heat up? Why do glasses break but never reassemble? Why do you grow older but never younger? And the deepest question of all, why do you remember the breakfast you had this morning but not the breakfast you'll have tomorrow? The leading answer, and it is the most important word in modern physics that almost nobody outside of a laboratory has ever heard, is entropy. Entropy is, very roughly, the tendency of organized systems to fall apart into disorganized ones. There are very few ways for a sandcastle to be a sandcastle, but there are trillions of ways for the same grains of sand to be a featureless heap on a beach. So when waves wash over it, when the universe shuffles things around, statistically, randomly, the sandcastle becomes the heap. Not because the universe wants it to, but because there are so many more heap arrangements than sandcastle arrangements that disorder almost always wins. Eventually, statistically, inevitably. Entropy doesn't violate the laws of physics. It doesn't override them. It rides on top of them, a statistical bias that points one direction, like a wind that always blows from the same side of the universe. And this is where memory comes in. A memory is not really a thing. A memory is a scar. It is a physical pattern etched into the cells of your brain by an interaction between you and the world. When something happens, atoms move, neurons fire, proteins fold, connections strengthen. A pattern is laid down, not in some immaterial soul, but in literal, physical, chemical traces inside the wet machinery of your skull. And here is the strange,
beautiful truth that follows. The reason that scar exists at all, the reason any trace of any event is left behind, is because entropy was running in one direction when the event happened. A footprint in sand exists because the sand was disturbed in a way that requires a foot to have been there. A scar on your knee exists because skin was torn and then repaired. A burnt log in a fireplace exists because a tree once stood, then fell, then was set on fire, and the entropy of all of that left a record. Memory is the same. Your brain is just a very, very complicated record of every entropic event that has imprinted on it. Every sight you've ever absorbed, every face you've ever loved, every word that has ever wounded you. They are physically carved into your neural tissue. And that is why you remember the past, but not the future. The future has not yet scarred you. It is not absent. It is not unborn. It may be right there, waiting along your world line. But the entropic wind has not yet blown across it. No interactions have yet imprinted on your brain. No light has yet reached your retinas. No sound has yet vibrated your eardrums. The events may be real. They may be coordinated. They may be filed. But the physical record of them has not yet been laid down, and so you cannot read them. Your life in this picture is a book that is already fully written. Every page exists. Every sentence is in place. But you can only read the pages that the entropic wind has dried. The future may feel uncertain not because it is uncertain. It may feel uncertain because you have not yet been scarred by it. The flashlight has not yet reached that page. The wind has not yet dried that ink. But the page is there. The ink may already be real, and the page after that, and the page after that, all the way to the back cover. And every now and then, the wind blows the wrong way. The flashlight stutters. The page turns out of order. The scar tissue shows a pattern it should not have. And you call that déjà vu.
You've had it happen, probably more than once. You walk into a room and the hairs on the back of your neck stand up. You've been here before. Not in the abstract, in this exact configuration. The light coming through that window at that angle, the half-eaten apple on the counter, the dog's tail twitching against the chair leg. For about 2 seconds, your brain is convinced that you are not living a moment, you are reliving it. And then it passes, and you laugh it off. And the neuroscientists tell you what it was. A memory misfire, a temporal lobe stutter. The brain mistagging a present moment as a recalled one. That is the standard mechanical answer, and it is probably part of the truth. But it may not be the whole story. Because if your consciousness is something like a flashlight crawling across the frozen geometry of your life, if every moment you will ever live is already there, waiting to be illuminated, and if memory is just the scar tissue of moments the flashlight has already passed over, then what would happen if, just for a fraction of a second, your light bled past the slice it was supposed to be on? What if déjà vu is not your brain making a mistake? Now, to be clear, while neuroscience offers us a mechanical explanation for this glitch, the block universe allows for a more poetic and perhaps more profound possibility. What if déjà vu is your consciousness for one disastrous instant leaking forward through the block and brushing up against a moment you have not yet officially arrived at?
This may be why déjà vu always feels so familiar, but you can never quite place where the familiarity comes from. There is no specific memory it matches, because there isn't a memory yet. The scar hasn't formed. The page is still blank. In this poetic reading, you are not remembering the moment, you are previewing it, a few heartbeats early, as if your flashlight beam briefly stretched and licked the surface of a slice it wasn't supposed to touch. Some philosophers call this the consciousness fringe, the idea that what we experience as the present is not a knife-edge slice, but a slightly blurred region, a zone of awareness that occasionally bleeds into the moments immediately surrounding it. Most of the time, the bleed is too small to notice. The light is well focused. You feel only now. But once in a while, when you're tired, when the brain's filter is weak, when the geometry of a moment lines up just right, the fringe widens, and for 2 seconds, you feel two adjacent slices of the block at once. You feel the now, and you feel the almost now. And the only language your brain has for that experience is, I have been here before. You haven't been there before. You may be being there and about to be there at the same time. The block in this picture is leaking through. Some people experience this much more than others. Patients with certain forms of temporal lobe seizure report continuous déjà vu. Days of it, weeks. The horrifying conviction that every moment is a rerun. And in a block universe tinted reading, this isn't only a malfunction, it may also be a preview. Their flashlight is poorly calibrated. Their fringe is too wide. They may be seeing too much of the geometry at once. And if you let your imagination go just one step further, what if some moments in your life, moments you have not yet reached, are already aware of being watched, already aware of being remembered? What if, somewhere in the block, a future version of you is right now feeling déjà vu? Because this version of you, watching this video, is brushing against him through the corridor of time. Look up from the screen for a moment. Look at the room around you. Notice the angle of the light. Notice what your hands are doing. Somewhere in the block, if any of this picture is right, you may be about to feel this exact moment again, for 2 seconds, sometime in the next 40 years. And you will call it déjà vu, and you will laugh it off. You won't remember this part, but I do. I want to come back to something I said at the beginning of this video. I said the cruelest part of grief is the conviction that someone is gone, that a person you loved has been carried away by the river, that the conversation you wish you'd had, the apology you never made, the question you never asked, that all of it is now impossible, locked behind the wall of a moment that can never be reached again. That is what the river told you. The block tells you something different. If the block is right, and many serious readings of Einstein's equations point toward it, and every alien in every Andromeda taking a single step toward Earth seems to confirm it, then the moment your grandmother held your face in her hands when you were 6 years old is not gone. It is not in the past. It is a coordinate, a specific location in spacetime, as real right now as the chair you are sitting in. She is still there. She is laughing. She is holding your face. The light is still coming through that kitchen window. The clock on her wall is still ticking. None of it has been undone. You can no longer reach her because your flashlight is somewhere else now, crawling across a different slice of the block, far from that kitchen. But the kitchen has not been destroyed. The moment has not been erased. The river has not carried it away. The river was never real. She is at a different coordinate. That's all. And maybe, this is the strange consolation that the block quietly offers a grieving person. That what you lost was not the moment itself. What you lost was only your access to it. The kitchen, the laughter, the warm hands on your face. These are not memories of something that ended. They may be windows onto something that is still happening somewhere you can no longer go. That distinction is small, but it changes everything about what you are carrying. Every person you have ever lost is still where you left them, frozen, perfectly intact in a region of space-time that you can no longer illuminate. They are not in the past. They are somewhere else in the geometry, permanent, untouched, saved. The entropic wind has carried your flashlight onward, away from the kitchen, away from the hands on your face, away from the laugh. That is what we call loss. But the moment itself, the actual physical geometric event, is still there. The scar in your brain is faint. The original is luminous. And every version of you that ever loved them, the 4-year-old who learned to ride a bike with them, the teenager who slammed the door, the adult who held their hand at the end, all of those versions of you are also still there, still real, still loving them, still being loved. You are not losing your life as you live it. You are building a permanent 4-dimensional shape, a sculpture made of every breath you take, and that sculpture, once carved, can never be uncarved. The block does not forget. This is the strange comfort that physicists almost never talk about. The reason Einstein, in that letter about his dying friend, did not weep on the page. He believed, really believed, that Michel Besso had not gone anywhere. He had only become unreachable. There is a difference.
So the next time you feel it, that stutter, that impossible echo, the eerie certainty that this breath, this light, this stranger's face has happened before, don't dismiss it. What you're feeling is the architecture of reality, brushing against the soft membrane of your awareness, a reminder that you are not a creature trapped in the present, hemorrhaging time. You are a 4-dimensional being slowly waking up to the shape of yourself. Every moment you have ever lived is still being lived. Every moment you ever will live is already there, waiting for the flashlight to arrive. Every person you have ever loved is still being loved somewhere in the block by the version of you who first learned what their face looked like in lamplight. Nothing is ever lost. Nothing was ever flowing. We are the flashlights, you and I. Brief, moving, fragile. But the block beneath us is eternal. And every face you ever cherished is still there in the geometry, not behind you, not lost, not gone, just at a different coordinate, forever etched, forever real, waiting in the frozen light. Until next time, or perhaps more accurately, until somewhere else.